thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for the personal invitation to come and speak to you, David. I don't remember those stories. I don't remember doing that. I didn't say I didn't do it. I said don't remember doing it. But it's true. I wanted to make sure that although New Orleans had a consent decree and the federal government was over and overseeing and hovering over the police department, I wanted the community and the members of our department to know that we were going to change because change was needed, and that we were going to do it because we wanted to do it, not because someone was making us do it, but that's the way it was. So look, I just so appreciate David inviting me to be here. I see so many friends and colleagues, people I have worked with and served with over the years and had wonderful relationships. I saw Roy earlier. I saw a number of people. Thank you all. It's good to be here. I'm so glad you asked me to speak after lunch and not before lunch, because I'm no competition to hold people up from lunch. And so thank you for that. But now I got to do my job to make sure I can hold you for a few minutes now that you're full. And so some of you know me, some of you don't. And I appreciate David reading my bio. But you probably say, well, why bring him? Why Mike? Why Mike Harrison? What makes him qualified to just come and talk to us so much about reform? We heard a little bit about the bio, but what really is it about? And so David and I talked about what I would speak about: leading organizational change, my view from the top. And when I agreed to do that, I began to put some things together on what I would say. And because I have a very unique view, a very unique perspective, some will say no one else in America has that perspective, having led 2 major American city police departments. By the way, the only chief that has led 2 under a federal consent decree. Not just any consent decree, but each of them, first in New Orleans, which was the most expansive, the most comprehensive in the history of consent decrees and in the country. And for the first time, that consent decree was a total makeover of a police department. I have to give you just a little bit of context to help you know and see and hear and feel who I am and why I have this unique perspective. And so in 2012, when the DOJ finished its report and gave its findings, they called the New Orleans Police Department, and this is a quote, the most troubled police department in America. And I not only had the privilege of serving and leading in New Orleans, but then went on to Baltimore, as you heard, for the next 4.5 years. While in its new consent decree, which surpassed New Orleans, and it was now the most expansive and comprehensive consent decree in the country. And by the way, DOJ was now calling Baltimore the most troubled police department in America. And there were many who said it could not be fixed. So you probably say, well, what's wrong with him? That he would sign up for 2 departments that the country would say were the worst in the country and not likely able to be fixed. I'll give you a little bit more of why I have this perspective. You know, I've now served under 5 mayors, 2 in New Orleans and 3 in Baltimore. I'm probably the only chief in America who can say they've served under 5 mayors. But not only that, I was fortunate to survive and be retained as the police chief in 3 mayoral transitions. How is that even possible, you ask? Well, I'll tell you, I became the superintendent in my 24th year, served under my first mayor for 4 years, survived that transition, and the incoming mayor asked me to stay on as the police chief. I did for another 8 months until I was made an offer to come to Baltimore as the police commissioner. January 2019, I left for Baltimore to become the 41st police commissioner. However, 60 days after I got to Baltimore, the mayor was indicted. 2 weeks later, resigned, and then later went to prison. So I'm brand new in Baltimore. I sold my house in New Orleans, quit my good job, with 68% approval ratings from the community. Moved to a city I knew nothing about, and now I'm in Baltimore, and the mayor who hired me is gone. I got a call from Mayor Landrieu, who was the first mayor who I spent 4 years with, and Mayor Landrieu called me on the day she resigned, and he said, Chief, do I need to send the Navy SEALs in to get you? Do I need to send the 82nd Airborne in to parachute you out of there and bring you back to New Orleans? I said, no, I just signed a year lease on this townhome, and I moved out of my house in New Orleans. I got to stay here a year, with whether she's the mayor or not. He said, Chief, you are in the best possible position. Every chief in America is jealous of you. Every chief in America wants to be you. You are in the best possible position any chief can be in. He said, you know why? I said, no, man. He said, you're a chief without a mayor. He said, who's going to be the mayor? I said, well, by default, the city council president becomes the mayor. He only had 14 months left in the first mayor's term, so he had to run. It was an election cycle. He had to run for mayor. But 14 months later, he lost his own election, only getting 1% of the vote. So the city council person who was running for mayor became the mayor, and now I'm on the third mayor, who I served with for the last 2.5 years until I left this past August. And the reason I was recruited to come to Baltimore is because of the success I had in New Orleans with crime reduction, while at the same time navigating successfully through this federally mandated consent decree that you know about. But I left out the part that the reason Baltimore needed a police commissioner because the previous commissioner got indicted and went to prison. And that was the culture of city politics and the police department. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but leadership in the city government was ineffective. And they were looking for someone who could come in and handle what was called not just the most troubled or the most challenged, but the most corrupt police department in America. So I have this front end view that most people don't have. And I have a rear end view as well. My view is not just what I saw, but what I heard and what I experienced. And here's what I've heard. We've all heard it. And it really falls into 3 buckets. Number 1, police really can't effect or prevent crime. 2, reform compromises public safety, gets in the way of crime fighting. You can't do both at the same time. And 3, considering policing's racist origins, nothing really can be done about the policing culture. All 3 of those statements are false. We in this room know they're false. The hard part is, how do we convince the personnel that serve under us and serve the community that that's false? How do we not just say it from a press conference or podium, but how do we convince them? Crime prevention, crime reduction, along with honest, good, effective, efficient, and constitutional policing are not mutually exclusive. You've heard that. They can and do coexist together. As a matter of fact, one depends upon the other. We cannot get to true public safety, crime reduction, without community support. The health of the community's view and respect of its police department. Community participation, which only comes when the community has perceived its police department as legitimate, responsive, and serving the needs of the people in a fair and equitable and constitutional way. When this happens, and it has, we begin to see members of a community now participating in its own policing strategies, which is the true form of community policing. Information will flow from the police department to the community, and from a community to its police department, and that is the bridge that's built that creates a level of confidence and trust in the police department that allows it to be effective, that allows it to be efficient. And not only can it happen, we've seen it happen, which is my rear end view. I've been a part of it, a leader of 2 teams in cities that have made it happen. No one individual can do it, not even the best chief, commissioner, superintendent. No one person can do it. It absolutely requires a highly motivated, highly skilled and talented team of individuals who believe in the leadership vision, mission, and still have the capacity and the will to deliver on both public safety and reform at the same time. I dare not say that policing alone can do it. I had the benefit of having the resources from a mayor who gave me all of his political capital. I had all of the resources that I needed from that mayor who gave me everything I asked for. Now, I can't say the same for the other 4 mayors. But I had a mayor who believed in the vision. I had a mayor who actually asked for the DOJ to come and conduct the investigation in the city, and then asked for a consent decree until he found out how much it cost, and then complained for the next 4 years to me about being broke and why he can't give me money for other things. But he fully believed in the reform of that department because he too knew that that department was the most troubled in America. The question is, how do we get there? Where do we go from here? And I tell everybody everywhere I go that any success I had, I only had because of the dynamic members of my team who also fundamentally believed that public safety is a byproduct of constitutional policing. And a citizen's satisfaction only comes when they have good perception of the delivery of services and they perceive the delivery of services as legitimate. I've had people on my team like Arlinda and Otha Sandifer and John Thomas and Paul Noel and others who really believed that the department needed to be reformed. They had the capacity to do it, and they absolutely had the will to do it. And collectively, we were able to do that as a team. We had members of our monitoring team, members of the Department of Justice, who didn't see themselves as adversaries, although the process itself was adversarial, but saw themselves as partners and were willing to help and offer expertise and not fight, but were willing to help. Many of you are in this room today. The hardest group of people to convince that we can achieve legitimacy and perform with high levels of efficacy and integrity are the officers who actually do the work, because they have been conditioned over extremely long periods of time that that's the way they do their job, which they believe they do their job is through force or the threat of force. Enforcement or the threat of enforcement, whether legitimate or not. And then the dominant occupying presence, which is intimidation. That has been the policing culture of how we get people to comply with our directives, which we perceive we get from our elected officials who represent those people. So many chiefs who design their policies and structure their department are really doing so because the political will demands that they do it that way. It has been very difficult to get police officers and supervisors, and by the way, command level personnel, to unlearn that very false belief that that's the way they do their job. And then to reteach and to relearn the appropriate way to deliver police services. How do we get there? And I'll answer that. I've often said that we, the police, give you, the community, what we think you need, and we give it to you the way we think we should give it to you, rather than the true community policing concept of police-community collaboration and agreeing on what's needed, and then collaboratively agreeing on how we deliver that to you. One of the many things I had to highly focus on in both cities is reconditioning members, sworn and professional staff, at all ranks, was how we unlearn bad practices and then reteach and relearn the best practice way. The hardest part of unlearning, reteaching, and relearning is doing it in a way that does not directly state, suggest, or infer that officers are performing wrongly or performing corruptly. So how do we do that? We do that in 5 ways. We do that through policy, we do it through training, supervision, management, and discipline. Everything that is done in a law enforcement agency can be put into those 5 buckets. Everything falls into one of those categories. We, in order to be constitutional, good, effective, efficient, have to have the best, the strongest, but flexible and modern policies that bring about 21st century policing concepts. What is good and acceptable and needed by the people today, not policing of 20 years ago, but today. Training. What is the best practice standard training? Who's delivering it? How is it being delivered? People like Bill helped us to understand that we thought we were doing good. We weren't, until we saw how others were doing it. And then we realized how far short we were. How do we bring that to our department and then get our people to teach it and to understand that, yes, we could have done it better, but now we're doing it the right way? Supervision, what is it? How do we do it? Who are supervisors? What are their roles and responsibilities? What's the accountability mechanism for those who don't do it properly? Management, what is it? Who's management? What are their roles and responsibilities? Who selects who management is? What's the criteria for selection? What do we do about those who don't perform those roles and responsibilities correctly? Lastly, discipline. What is it? How do we give it? How do we dispense it appropriately? How do we temper it? How is it disseminated fairly and justly? Who gets it? Is it done fairly and equitably? We did this a little bit in New Orleans, but I learned a valuable lesson. We really did it a lot more in Baltimore. We had community input in all of that. We had community members help design policy. Community members help design training, and we brought community members in to help deliver the training. And so when community members stood in front of the police officers and said, this is the training, and this is, by the way, when you do this, this is how it makes us feel. And when you do X, Y, and Z, this is what it does to the community. And this is why we respond to you and react the way we do when you do these things. And when you do it correctly, this is the response community will get. And so community infused in policy, training, supervision, management, and discipline is a core component of really adjusting the culture and adjusting, relearning, reteaching, and unlearning bad behavior. We preach daily to our members of our police department that we are a part of a community that we serve. We never refer to ourselves as us against them. Now, I had to spend a lot of time saying that every day, to the extent that I've moved away from saying community police relations as if they're separate. It's community relations if we're a part of the community. But as long as we call it community police relations, it will subconsciously get into the minds of people and think that there are two sides that have to come together. But it's really, if we do it right, it's community relations, because we should always see ourselves as a part of the community. And while members of the community and residents and visitors who we serve might sometimes take things personal, we should not. From my view, I've had my departments that this country was watching in disgust and disdain because of our dishonor, and we were called the worst of the worst. I've seen it turn around with the help of people like Alinda, others in this room, with the help of elected officials who cared enough to give us the resources and give us the political backing to do this work. I've seen and been blessed to see the national view of these two departments take a 180-degree shift. And now, instead of being the laughingstock of the country and being called the most troubled police department in America, I've been blessed to see the turnaround now in New Orleans, most recently in Baltimore, become model police departments that other departments from around the country visit and send their leadership teams to stay a day, 2 days, 3 days a week, 2 weeks, so that they can observe and learn and figure out how to turn themselves around and how to provide public safety while reform at the same time. Now, instead of borrowing the newest and best practice from somewhere else, we've been having the distinct pleasure of watching police departments like New Orleans and Baltimore create the newest and best practice that shape how management, reform, crime fighting, crime prevention, crime reduction are all done in this country. So as they said to me when I arrived in Baltimore, both members of the community and members of my police department, it can't be done. Not only can it be done, but we proved to those members and to the community that it is done. We've proved to them that it can be done. Many of those people were still in denial. They were in denial that public safety and crime reduction and meaningful reform can be achieved together when police and community have what I call shared creation of goals. Shared creation to the path to achieving those goals, and then shared accountability. I'll explain what that is. You heard me say we invited members of the community to have input in policy design, input in training delivery, input in the job descriptions of supervisors and management, and community input on what discipline should be and how it should be dispensed. So we had shared creation, we had shared pathway to achieving those goals, and we have shared accountability. Then and only then can you see a community begin to restore some of the trust, some of the confidence it once had, now wants to have again in a police department. And then you have people who now view a police department that went from being illegitimate to now some level of legitimacy. The 3 simple points that I lead and live by, I make my team hear it every day of every week. Linda had to hear me say it every day for 4.5 years. Build relationships that were never built. Improve good relationships, and then repair broken relationships. And I told our members, if in everything you do, with every person with whom you come in contact, how you handle their concerns, how you handle their complaints, how you look at them when they speak to you and listen attentively, either builds new relationships, improves good ones, or repairs broken ones. Some of you might say, well, how does one go into a broken agency? How does one go into a troubled agency or corrupt agency? How does one get a police department to turn itself around, either with federal oversight, state oversight, local oversight, good police management, or a combination of all of it? How do you overcome the resistance? How do you overcome the pushback and the blue wall of protection of police culture and the police subculture? I have that answer. I'm going to give it to you. In 2015, I was at a meeting in Chicago in police reform. I had been the police chief about 1.5 years. I was brought into this meeting where the Chicago Police Department leadership was present and the Baltimore Police Department leadership was present. And I was brought in as the chief of the New Orleans Police Department to prepare Baltimore and Chicago for what they were going to face in the very near future, being that both cities were facing an oncoming consent decree. Some of you asked the questions, how do you get people to comply and overcome resistance? Well, I answered that question then, and I'll answer it now. At that meeting, I coined a phrase that caught on around the country, and it's been repeated many times. Sometimes you gotta shoot a hostage. Metaphorically. Metaphorically. There are times the only way the leader can overcome resistance, to show the leadership resolve for meaningful change, is by using any and every legal means to permanently remove barriers to meaningful change. Using every legal means to remove those cancerous recalcitrants who refuse to believe in a better way. And they expend all their energy obstructing progress and poisoning anyone who will listen. We had to, with the help of a great team, with the help of supporters, create the infrastructure in the department through strong policy, through all brand new training, supervision, management, and strong discipline, all with community input. Create the infrastructure that insulated me, the chief, and all of my executive decisions, but isolated the political influence. An infrastructure that sent a message to a mayor, council members, you do not get to say how this agency is run, although you give vision for the city, and of course I submit to the pleasure and work at the pleasure of a mayor. It insulated me, the organization, the leadership team, so that we could select and promote based on knowledge, skill, ability, temperament only, and not political influence. And that when discipline was given, it was given fairly, equitably, constitutionally. There was no influence on who got punished, who did not, who got assigned, who did not, who got promoted, who did not. And this infrastructure I carried from New Orleans into Baltimore, as you can see, had that cronyism culture. And we had to build that. Every chief is not afforded the opportunity to do that, but every chief should do their absolute best to build that infrastructure that insulates them but isolates the political influence. Because good police officers are standing by watching and waiting to see how the profession is being shaped and who's doing the shaping. I am absolutely okay admitting that both New Orleans and Baltimore could not have been changed without federal oversight and without a federal judge willing to hold me, the department, the mayor in contempt should we not comply. In both cities, people like David Douglas and others in this room working to hold us accountable. We could not do it on our own. Are there cities where it can be done without federal oversight? Perhaps. The two that I was in, we could not. As the chief executive, I could not be successful without the dynamic leaders of people like Alinda and others in both cities. Having the members of those teams who really bought in, had the will and capacity to lead and to effect change, and to have people willingly follow, I could not do it alone. So even the departments who we consider to be the worst can turn around with the right support and help from the experts of people like you in this room. We have the capacity. All we need is the will. Lastly, this is not related to law enforcement. It's related to public speaking. And I learned this lesson a long time ago. Speak up to be heard. Stand up to be seen. Then go sit down to be appreciated and get invited back. Thank you.